Today's live stream is going to be about thinking in a foreign language, thinking in English. How do you teach yourself to think faster in a foreign language? We're talking about English, since I hope everybody who's following my channel is learning English, and I create my content, well, first of all for myself, because my ambition is to achieve native-like fluency, and I believe everyone who is following or everyone who is doing the same exercises that I'm sharing, their ambition is to explore the methodology of achieving native-like fluency and finding the exercises that work for them. Because again, not everything is going to work for every single individual. You know, I had a few ideas and I wanted to show you how my mind connected them today. The first thing that I wanted to go back to is the ability to think in a foreign language, and most people are frustrated because they cannot think fast enough. Well, they think fast in their first language, however, they do not find the words in English as fast as they wish they could find them when they need to say something in the English language. How do you train this ability to articulate your ideas gracefully, thoughtfully, and immediately? Because that's what we want. At least every individual strives for meaning in whatever they do. And when we communicate with people, all we want these interactions to be meaningful. And when you can only talk about work and work-related stuff, and when you can only use the baggage of knowledge that you already have, and when you only have your toolbox with all the words and expressions that you already know and you've used a million times, it gets boring even for you as a learner. It gets boring because you cannot do more. Even if your English skills are amazing, even if your English skills are outstanding and everybody tells you that, pay attention to the fact who this everybody is, because it's a big and important question. If you speak English better than anybody in the office, it doesn't mean that everybody's English skills are bad, but it also doesn't mean that your English skills are exceptional. And I know a lot of people, and I've been there myself, who have been through this experience. Everybody was telling them that their English skills are, just so good. Why do you even continue taking English classes? Why do you keep looking for English courses? Why do you keep learning? Your English skills are already good. They were good enough for them, but they were not good enough for the people who are striving for more knowledge, people who are aiming at getting to the next level. So how do you teach yourself to think faster in a foreign language? We have to keep in mind that the ultimate goal of learning a language, or maybe not the goal, but the result, this is what always happens. The result is that we develop our second language identity as a scientific linguistic fact. And if you know people who speak English very well, who speak a few languages fluently, you probably notice that when they switch from one language to another, they sound slightly different. Of course, they pronounce words and sounds absolutely differently, and as soon as they switch to another language, their articulation muscles and their jaw muscles immediately start working completely differently. And they sound also like a completely different person because their intonations change immediately. How they put words together, how they pause and where they pause and where they go up and down, everything changes. And even their body language might change as well, even the pitch of their voice, because that can influence the meaning of what they are articulating. And that is normal. That is a very normal thing. If you look at kids who are bilingual and who switch from one language to another, you're going to notice that as well. But we're talking about adults right now. Those adults who are not bilingual, who didn't learn English in a family where both parents were native speakers, no, we're not talking about that situation. We're talking about adults who started learning English at some conscious age and they keep going. The exercise that I shared yesterday in the stories is naming all these things that are around you. When you do so, you are teaching yourself a different mindset as well, because in order to, you can't really do this on purpose. I started my thought and I had to stop halfway because it's just not correct to say. I can't say in order to sound differently in a foreign language, because this is not something that you really control. And that's not something that you probably want to aim for. It just happens so that once you switch to another language, you sound absolutely differently. And the reason for that is that our mindset changes. You start thinking differently, you start seeing the world slightly differently, and your mindset affects the way you express yourself in a language. When you learn a foreign language, it's essential that you don't only learn the words and the grammar, but you also learn the culture. You also dive into those cultural knowledge, that you also learn social norms, that you also get to know how people communicate, even like what interjections they use. In Russian, when it hurts, we say oi. In German, they're going to say aua. In English, they're going to say ouch. So what's the first thing that comes to mind when something hurts you all of a sudden? What's the first thing that comes to mind? In what language will you say it? All these things, they can be trained, but all these things, you don't train it deliberately. This is just something that happens. You experience the compound effect of simple exercises that you do day in, day out when you work on achieving native-like fluency. It's not something that you can predict, it's not something that you can work for, but it's something that ultimately always happens when you invest your time in learning a language, and especially in learning a language according to the system of native-like fluency, which is not about the language even, it's about yourself, because we are working on our own personality, we're working on our own mindset, and when our mindset changes, I'm not even sure that changes is the right word, at least with me, the way I feel it is that I live in two parallel universes, at least my mind, and when I switch to a different language, it's a parallel cognitive universe. My cognitive abilities are different, not in the meaning they're worse or better, they're just different. I imagine different things when I hear English words. I group words differently. Different idioms, proverbs, and sayings come to mind. It's just different. It's really different cognitive abilities and how you see the world and what images come to mind when you hear certain words or when you say certain words. Because ultimately, we don't think in words. Whenever we communicate with other people, we kind of send images. And I think one of the best presentations you can give is the presentation where people see your message. People don't just listen to you because you have something important to say. They don't just read your slides, but they can visualize the message. They can see the meaning of what you're saying, and you're able to plant the right image in their head. And as a result, you see the same image. You have an image in your head that is very clear, and then people get to see exactly the same image. Because the problem with many presentations given by non-native speakers is miscommunication. To give you a very trivial example, people send a message that is shaped as a sphere, let's say, and they send it to another person, and another person receives a triangle, and it's black, and they don't really know what to do with this. So we intend to send one message, but people end up receiving completely different messages, not the ones we intended to send. To avoid that, or to learn not to do that, it's not enough to learn to translate concepts, words, ideas. It's not enough to learn more vocabulary. It's not enough to master grammatical rules. It's not enough. What is more important here is that you teach yourself different cognitive abilities. You teach yourself to understand this different mindset that all the native speakers share. They do share a different mindset. If you understand how these people think, you can absolutely communicate with them, and you can teach yourself to speak in such a way so that they hear and see your message. They don't just listen to you, they really hear you. In order to learn that, you need to develop your own ability to communicate your ideas to that mindset. So I would say you need to learn to adopt that a little bit. It doesn't mean you adopt it and you ditch your mindset that you were born with, you ditch the other mindset, but it means you can switch between the two very easily, depending on where you are, depending on who you're talking to. When we know who's in front of us, when we know who our audience is, we know how to communicate our message. How will you explain electricity to a kid? How do you explain grammar rules to a student who is going to get a teacher's degree, somebody who understands linguistics, and to somebody who just wants to understand how to build a sentence right? How do you explain that? You're going to choose different vocabulary, different sentences, different style, different intonations. When we give presentations at work, we know that everybody understands the context and we choose certain vocabulary that people outside of work will probably not understand. When you explain what you do for a living to your grandparents, you choose completely different vocabulary. Hopefully you get my point, and we can use this analogy to understand what it means to speak to people in the language in which they perceive information. Even if we speak the same language, sometimes you have to be very careful with your choice of words. But when we speak to people whose first language is different from ours, then we have to be even more careful and more deliberate with what we're saying. Exercise number 1 that can dramatically improve your ability to teach yourself to adopt that mindset that they share, to think differently, is to simply name everything around you. What is this thing? What is this color? What is this thing that I'm wearing? Like, what do you call all this? I suggest you start with a very simple thing, which is food. Just tell yourself, explain to yourself out loud, what is it that you ate today for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner? What did you do this weekend? This is a slightly different exercise. I call it editing your life experience, but start with naming things. You can open any random pictures on the internet and explain them. What is it that you see in the background here? What is it that you see in a picture online? Or what do you see on your plate? You know it. And when we listen to native speakers, most often we understand what they're telling us, we just don't understand how they're doing it. And because we don't understand how they did it, we cannot repeat. This is exercise number 1, name everything. Exercise number 2, editing your life experience. Ask most people, how was your weekend? 99% of people will say, when was weekend? What did I even do this weekend? Let me think. We don't edit our life experience. When we tell people about our vacation, we sound like a boring tour guide. When we tell people about our weekend, we sound like we don't even care about our own weekend and about our own life. We don't even care about our own experiences. But trust me, most people who work on achieving native-like fluency, they come here not because they want to talk about work a little bit better. They already can talk about work. They already can give presentations at work. I mean, people who want to improve their presentation skills in English, it's a different story. Yes, there is always room for improvement, and we work on structuring the message, on communicating the ideas correctly. That's a different story. But most people who want to continue working on their language skills, they just want to learn to communicate with other human beings, not about work, but about their feelings, about the things that are happening in their head, about what it is that occurred to them today, about what their kids taught them to see or to experience. They want to know how to talk to their kids about stuff. And I have situations where people have kids who speak English better than them. And kids speak English all day at school, with nannies, and just with other kids. And their parents can't communicate with their own kids because their English skills are not enough. We have situations where people are married and they come from different cultural backgrounds and they cannot communicate with their own partner. The communication is not as deep as I would like it to be. They cannot talk about everything. Or people just cannot enjoy the beauty of the culture, of the language, simply because they don't understand all of it. They might have so much to say and to express, but they just can't. And when people work on improving their ability to think in English, to speak in English, to write in English, they don't really want to write or speak better about work. Because work is a set of very limited topics. And people who work in an international company, they are professionals for a reason. They know what they're doing, right? And people understand them. They usually communicate within a project where everybody understands what this project is about. And it's just a lot easier. But try to tell people something about yourself, your interests, a book that you read recently, your insights, your take on life, and that immediately gets more complicated. So editing your life experience is a fantastic exercise. Simply explain to yourself, what was your weekend like? There are 2 strategies. Number 1 is journaling. Just start journaling, which means start explaining these things to yourself in writing. It doesn't mean that you have to write every single day. Maybe you will write every other day or twice a week or 3 days a week. But you might want to answer very simple questions that pop up in your head anyway. All of us have a lot of questions on our minds that we don't really know how to answer, so you might want to try to find the answer on paper. Or you can simply ask yourself, what surprised me the most today? What's the most beautiful thing that I saw today? What is it that I remember the most about today? Just answer one of those questions, and that would be enough. And see what you will end up writing, because when we write, we show to ourselves how we think. And you can take a look at your thought process in writing. It's going to be a very honest look, because you don't have to think much before you write it down. You don't have to think much or analyze it. You just have to write. Because the hardest part here is to put it on paper. But after you have written down what you think, you have some time to analyze it. And if it's difficult to analyze it right away, you may leave it aside for a few days, or you may keep a journal for a week and then come back to it a week later and actually look for patterns, look for repetitions, and again, look at the way you think, you structure your sentences, look at what words you choose. Maybe you will find that you repeat yourself a lot, and maybe you will find that you're absolutely not able to communicate the depth and all of it that is happening inside of you in words or in sentences. Or maybe you will find the opposite, that you actually can, and it's working for you. My experience was that I couldn't, and I could never write one or two sentences that would define what it is that I'm feeling right now. And I had to write a page, sometimes 2 pages, sometimes even 3 pages. And I would go through the pages I've written, 3 pages of text, and I still haven't answered the question. I still haven't found what is it that I want to say. I'm just going around it, and I'm using a lot of words, and I realize that this is how I think. This is my thought process. Sometimes, we have to talk about something out loud to even understand what it is that we're talking about. Some people just function this way. We need to say it out loud to ourselves, even though we're talking to other people. Actually, we're doing it for ourselves, because we're helping ourselves understand the gist, the meaning, the idea that is probably dwelling in our mind, and we're not aware of it, or we cannot formulate it. It's just there, but we can't find the words to formulate it. Everybody's experience is going to be different, but this is one of the most rewarding exercises, because you're getting to know yourself. You will see how you actually think, how you build your sentences, what words you tend to choose, and what skills you're lacking. And when you see what skills you're lacking, maybe it's the skill of connecting ideas. Maybe it's the skill of getting to the point. That was my story. I could never get to the point. So what I would do is I would take all these 3 pages of text, and I would ask myself, can I compress it, and can I make it 1 page? After I have written down 1 page, I would ask myself, can I make it 1 paragraph? And then I would reduce it to half a paragraph, and then I would reduce it to 1 sentence. Everything that's going on in my mind, can I say it in 1 sentence? What's the most important thing that's going on in here? What's the answer to the question that's bothering me? And I would teach myself to answer my own questions in 1 sentence. You can do it in your first language. You can do it in English. The exercise is rewarding both ways. But if you want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and if you want to teach yourself to speak better English, to communicate your ideas with more clarity in English, then do it in English. I promise you, you will learn a lot of new words if you know how to edit your writing, and this is what I teach all my writing students. How do you edit your thought process in writing? Because you might have written a sentence, but when you read it out loud that it doesn't sound natural, and you show it to native speakers, and they go like, that doesn't really sound right, we don't talk this way. You will see that some articles are missing, that the prepositions are misplaced, and a lot of other things. We have a list of 48, I believe, resources. All of them are free, and all of them are publicly available. The only thing that you need is you need to know how to work with them. And people have all those resources, and they know how to use them to self-correct their writing and their thought process. If you use this exercise to improve your writing skills, to improve the logic of your writing, the flow, the ability to connect ideas and to get to the point, you will end up having 2 versions: the original version of your text and the edited version of your text. And the edited version, when you read it out loud, will blow you away, because it's going to be so much different, and it's going to sound so much more natural and actually native-like. That's what we want to achieve. Trust me, it's absolutely feasible. It's something that you can do yourself. You don't need to hire editors, people who will correct your writing, teachers. You can do this all by yourself. Of course, if you work in marketing, you're a copywriter, let's say, right? Or you write commercial offers, you write marketing materials in English, then yes, it's a good idea to have a good editor go through your blog posts, your copy, and help you make it sound a lot better. If you're not a copywriter, and if it's not your job to write English text, then probably you don't need that. When you work on improving your thought process in writing, when you teach yourself to adopt a different mindset and to speak English in a way that people who share a different mindset can hear and understand you, you're doing this in writing, but it always has a huge impact on your speaking skills. You learn to do the same thing when you speak, even without trying. You don't have to do anything special to teach yourself to do the same thing you're doing in writing when you speak. It just happens. Because all starts here with how we think. We do it in writing because we have time. We don't have time to think differently or to learn to think differently when we speak. We just have to speak because the conversation is going on. We have to reply. But when we write, we have the time to do that. Once we've taught ourselves that, we ultimately experience a great change when it comes to speaking skills. We sound differently. We notice that everything we have learned manifests itself when we speak. It's just inevitable. That always happens. I've seen so many examples when that was the case. That's the case with me. That's my story. So that is a fantastic exercise. Journaling, editing your life experience. And one more exercise that I have mentioned already so many times, and I still feel it's worth talking about it again, because this is the exercise that teaches us to understand the culture of those people who speak English from birth. And the exercise is reading fiction. Let me tell you what I mean by reading. Many students tell me that they don't see the point in reading fiction. They go through a page of text and they say, I understand all the words here, I know all the words here, so what's the point of reading it? I mean, there are no more new words that I can learn here, so what's the point? All right, my question is then, if all the words on this page are familiar, and you know all of them, and there is nothing new you can learn from this page, why is it that when you speak English, you use absolutely different words, constructions, you forget your articles, you use the wrong prepositions, you don't use the tenses correctly? Why is that the case then? Many people think that learning means seeing new information, writing it down, and that counts as learning. If they haven't taken any notes with absolutely new information, it doesn't count, and it means they haven't learned anything. But I believe that learning happens in here. It's not about the input of new information. You might be looking at the thing that you have in your house. You've always had it. It's always been there. But you look at it with new eyes one day and you finally get it, and finally it hits you. And this is how learning happens. Not when somebody sits in front of you and says, okay, I'm going to teach you this. Listen carefully and write things down. No, but when you are ready to understand this is when the learning happens. It doesn't have to be new information. You might be looking at the same thing. You might be watching the same video that you saw a year ago. You might be watching the replay of the lesson that you thought you understand completely, and then it just suddenly hits you and you understand. So when we work with fiction books, I suggest the exercise is really to read fiction, not anything else, because people read a lot of blog posts, people read a lot of articles, work-related articles, people read a lot of documents, and that doesn't really help them, because we do not speak using the language in work-related articles. Yes, we might need them for a meeting. We speak to our clients or our bosses using that vocabulary, but it doesn't help us communicate with other human beings better. People read those articles because they need to understand certain information. They read it silently to themselves, they understand it, and then they go and do their work. Or people are interested in whatever topic, maybe boxing, maybe cooking, maybe anything. They read something about it, they digest it, they learn something, but they never vocalize it, right? They learn a concept, maybe they see a way to do this move better, or they find a better solution to feed their cat or whatever. They find probably a meal replacement for their cat or anything like that, and then they just switch to whatever they were doing. Even if they consume a lot of information in English, very often it does not change the way they speak English. It doesn't help them improve their speaking skills or their thinking skills or their reading skills or their writing skills. it does not affect their fluency. And we want to change it. We want to do the opposite. We want to deliberately work with fiction books so that we teach ourselves to improve our speaking skills dramatically. This is why we always read out loud. You never read a page meaning you glance over it, you understand it, and that's it. You always want to read it out loud. In order to read something out loud and enjoy it, you want to pick something that you actually enjoy, something that makes sense to you, something that resonates with you. I have a whole library of different excerpts from fiction books that I absolutely adore, and all of them make sense to me. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to like them, but I'm sure that everybody's going to find something out of 150 books and excerpts in the library that they will like. You read it out loud, trying to imitate the manner of someone who narrates an audiobook. You want to make sure that people who listen to you can understand what the book is about, can see the scene that you're describing, can see and imagine the character just by listening to you. They don't really need to see the text. They can understand all this just by listening to you. And that is a skill. And that takes practice, and that takes a lot of time. And trust me, in order to read it in such a way that it sounds compelling and big and vivid, you need to read it a lot of times yourself. You need to understand it yourself. My tip is that you never ever read anything out loud that you don't understand. If you don't understand it, never even try, never even start reading it. First, take your time to understand it, then read it out loud. In order to read it out loud so that other people understand it, and we mean other native speakers understand it, we want to read every word correctly. So you will have to check the pronunciation of all the words that you are not sure about, that you kind of remember but you haven't used for a while. You will need to pause in the right places so that people hear the thought groups. People hear the connections between thought groups. People hear the meaning of every sentence. You need to feel it, and this is what we're practicing here. So many people want to get the feel for the language. People are not ready to invest any time in developing their language skills, but they want to get the feel for the language. They think it's something that can happen chaotically, overnight. It just happens. No, it really might happen like that, but only after you have invested a lot of time and effort into this. You do simple exercises regularly, and the compound effect of these exercises is that one day you realize that, oh, you really get it. You really feel it. It's really paying off. All this effort is paying off. At least to me, the biggest asset here is people and their ideas and their minds. If I want to learn to speak better, and I already explained at the beginning of the video what it is for me to speak better, what native-like fluency is for me, I want to learn to feel the language. I want to learn to read between the lines. I want to learn to read the meaning, not just the words. I want to see beyond words. And that means understanding the cultural code. And fiction is our most readily available instrument. It's there. It's free most of the time. Well, if you buy a book that you enjoy reading, why not? But you can find so many excerpts of fiction books for free. There are open libraries where you can enjoy reading classics. But it's the best instrument to understand human character, to learn to talk about emotions, to learn to understand how native speakers express their ideas, explain things to one another. So when you read that page, you don't have to read the entire book. All you need to do is you need to read a page. If a page is too much, start with one paragraph. All my students start with one paragraph and read it out loud so that it makes sense. So that it makes sense to you in the first place, and get feedback from other people. Does it make sense to them when they listen to you? I have a lot of examples in the playlist Natalia Reads. I do this exercise a lot, and you can go to the playlist on SoundCloud, Natalia Reads, and get to listen to all the books that I read, all the excerpts from fiction books and blog posts and business books that I read. The excerpt itself is attached in the description of every track, so if you want to practice with me and if you want to learn the same piece together with me, go ahead and practice on your own, and you can compare the way you read with how I read, and please feel free to share the link so that I can enjoy someone else reading this beautiful passage or this beautiful page If you're taking my course, we have a resource library, as I said earlier, with more than 150 books, and you can choose from them. You can choose the book that you feel like reading today, or you simply go online and find any excerpt that you like. Why is it important to start with one paragraph only? I already said that people don't really understand what I mean when I mention the exercise of reading out loud. They say, I know the words, there are no new words, it's boring to read again and again, because probably they choose the book that is boring to them and that is not interesting for them to read out loud. Because it's interesting to vocalize all these ideas and to make them heard and to hear them yourself. At least to me, it's fascinating. Maybe they just choose the content that is not interesting for them. But other people, there's another group of people who think that they're doing too little, that they're not investing enough time if they only read one paragraph. And let me tell you this, you have to start with one paragraph, and one paragraph is actually a lot of work. Most people just can't read fiction because, as I said, they don't see anything valuable for themselves when they simply skim a book, when they try to read it fast, when they try to consume a book in a few hours, because this is the information we're bombarded with. Read 100 books a year. Read this, read that, read faster. It's not the point when our goal is to improve our fluency. It's not the point to read faster. The point is to understand deeper and to understand more. And the point is to improve our ability to communicate our ideas in English with more clarity and with, of course, better vocabulary. Speed is not the thing here at all. I don't have the time to read all those books, from cover to cover. Honestly, I enjoy reading excerpts, and I don't have the time to read the entire book. I will read the entire book if it really got my attention, but sometimes, very often actually, I focus on different things. So if my focus is to enjoy the book, I will read the whole book. If my focus is to improve my language skills, I will work with 1 or 2 paragraphs, maybe a page, and I will work on the speed of comprehension. I will work on improving my vocabulary. I will work on improving the rhythm and chunking, and I will work on my pronunciation, my enunciation, and my ability to communicate my own ideas in English when I say them out loud. That's what I'm practicing when I read fiction books. I don't feel the pressure to read the entire book. And nobody can tell me what I should read and how much I can read. But I always choose the content that I enjoy. I absolutely love it. I admire it. Some ideas blow me away. I would have never articulated them this way. And that's what I love about them. This is why if you don't know how to read fiction, and if you don't know how to approach reading fiction books, don't start with the whole book. Start with one paragraph. Once you have learned to work with one paragraph only, then you will understand how to read the entire book. Small steps that pay off a big deal. You don't know how to read fiction books, you don't see any results, you get annoyed because you start reading a book and you have this feeling that you have to look up every second word because it just makes no sense. You don't understand so many words here on one page. You've already found 50 words on one page that you don't understand. Don't torture yourself. Start with one paragraph. There will be a lot fewer words that you don't know in one paragraph, and you will enjoy it a lot more, and you will get a sense of accomplishment from reading one paragraph. Just make sure that this work counts and make sure that you complete the exercise. It's a lot easier to complete reading one paragraph than to complete reading the entire book. Start with one paragraph and you will see big changes coming very soon. If you got an English degree, or if English was your major or your minor at the university, you also feel this pressure that you're supposed to speak English very well, but for some reason you can't. It's very simple and very logical. If you don't use the skill, you lose it. I think I wrote about it just a few days ago. I understand and I'm very well aware of the fact that if I stop right now, if I stop practicing my English skills, they will start deteriorating and I will start losing it. This is why I keep going. It just makes no sense. When people ask me how many months exactly or how many weeks exactly should I practice to get to that level, I'm not really sure what they mean. Like, are you asking when you're supposed to stop? Okay, it depends on at which point you're going to be satisfied with yourself, because you can stop anytime. You can stop right now. You will maintain your current level and then you will start losing your current level. If you stop a little bit later, again, you will maintain the level that you will have acquired by that time, and then you will start losing it again, inevitably. I have 2 episodes of a podcast, How to Fit Infinite Learning in Your Very Finite Day. Maybe you want to listen to that, because I talk about different spheres of life and how I apply the same principles to learning different skills. Thank you very much for being here today. That's going to be it, and I'll see you in the next videos.